Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and we are at the tail end, 11:30 on Monday night, Martin Luther King Day, the tail end of Wildcard Weekend. What a weekend it was. How are you?
The best thing I can say is that we're back to a universe where I don't have to worry about a Philly, a Dallas, a Georgia, or a Florida State championship. So now it's house money for me for the rest of the playoffs. That's good news.
A lot of things to rifle through. We're going to go through all of Wild Card Weekend, and then we're going to go through a little bit of Giants news. The Giants hired an offensive line coach from the Las Vegas Raiders, and we got some closure on the Wink Martindale and New York Giants tenure. So lots to go through here. Let's start right with what just concluded. The Bucs absolutely demolishing the Philadelphia Eagles at home, 32-9. We were just kind of talking about this, but we decided to jump right into this. This Philly collapse is something to be, said for. It feels like the bottom fell from underneath it, but we were kind of saying this. It feels like a bunch of little things that just started to stack up right from the beginning of the year. I don't think they ever really looked great at any point this year. They looked very good to start this year, and it just never seemed to go up. It seemed to go down. They seem to falter. It seems to me as far back as October when you and Cranky and I were sitting at a bar in Buffalo watching the Jets take it to them to start the game. And then we're walking into the stadium and there's like this shockwave among the people walking in that the Jets had just won because it had AFC East and NFC East implications for both teams there. So that seems to be the first point where there were serious cracks in that organization, and it all fell apart. It looks like, in my opinion, moving around defensive coordinator duties was probably a bad thing for confidence. And if you take away beating the Giants on Christmas Day, a game in which they nearly had lost from themselves, not a single thing the Giants were doing right in that game, they would have lost something like 7 straight games to close out the season. It's been a long time that this has been a problem. So, yeah, it's incredible. But a lot of things. They also got hurt down the stretch. I mean, there's a lot of things I think fell into it.
Yeah, and not only just changing for defensive coordinator, but Matt Patricia, who is like the anti-Midas touch guy, because everything he touches turns to shit.
The Shitus touch, yeah. We've talked about the Shitus touch way back on this show.
And that unlucky pencil he has in his ear, just it did its magic spell again. So not one person listening to this podcast, and probably most people around the country, are not shedding any tears for this team. I was texting with some friends during the game, and I figured, is there any, there's somebody was saying about, there's so many people hate Dallas. And I'm like, is there a team in this league that has a higher percentage of people that hate them versus people that like them? I mean, Dallas has a lot of people that love them. A lot of people hate them too, but nobody likes Philly. Especially anybody who's not from a 50-mile radius of, the Ben Franklin statue in City Hall. And, they're just a team that has they had that swagger the last couple of years. It just seemed phony. It just seemed like, every move that we've documented this several times on this show, every move they seemed to make was as much as a wink to, trolling the Giants as it was to actually improving their own team. And, they're getting their comeuppance now, and nobody feels bad for them. This is really one of the more shocking things I've seen in a season. Sometimes teams fall apart. Well, they lost their quarterback. They lost, a complete rash of injuries that leaves you bare. But, they've had injuries. I'd love to read the book. What happened this season?
But not more than Buffalo. You know what I mean? Like they've had injuries, but they are not the most decimated team in the league. I mean,
of course,
for Christ's sake, they've been able to play Jalen Hurts just about every single game this year. It's something I can't even relate to.
Yeah, they went down. They didn't go down to their third string quarterback. They didn't go down to a Tommy DeVito. They've had injuries here and there, and just you know, but a lot of it just seemed like the last couple of weeks, the Giant game last week and that Buck game this week was that looked like a team had quit. And we lauded the Giants for the second half of this year for not looking like they quit. That team just looked like they quit on, especially on defense. We saw, forget the pathetic tackling, just it looked to me like some of these games this weekend that were played in terrible weather conditions, how guys looked like they were running around on roller skates because they just were slow. And that's how the Eagles look, today. And I think a lot of that was effort. So yeah, I'm calling them out. I think this team quit. In addition to having the lack of confidence and the when you're a bully and you get stood up to by some teams. So it'll be interesting to see. Did you think before this season started that there's a very good chance that the longest tenured coach in this division would be Brian Dable? Not me.
Well, nothing's official yet,
I said
right?
it's good. It could be very possible. I didn't predict it. I didn't guarantee it, but it's a very good chance of it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not really sure where the source of the Nick Sirianni rumors came from that started swirling, but they swirled so early in this, in my opinion anyway, so early in this Philly collapse
Hmm.
that I have to think that it's not nothing. You know what I mean? Like, that's a really outrageous leap to take without any sort of backing. So I really think that there's something to it. They've only gotten louder as the momentum has completely dropped off. The train's totally off the rails and now into the ravine. Um,
That makes me think it's so the issues are so deep rooted that it's not a question of oh, I don't like this defensive coordinator. I mean, that seemed like a guy, Sirianni from the outside, that in the mold of like a Jim Harbaugh or someone where they can be a very good coach, but they're going to outstay their welcome pretty quickly, and that might have been happened. He's got it. He's got that kind of personality. That guy you just want to punch in the face, and
oh my god! And
maybe
I
got
want
someone like Lori might want to punch him in the face right now.
Yeah, and I want to say that he hasn't been so punchable lately, so maybe they told him to knock it off or whatever. But it's not like he had anything to celebrate or be happy about. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's certainly interesting, and you start to wonder. Just a few years removed from winning a Super Bowl, they move on from Doug Peterson. Very quickly, potentially moving on from Nick Sirianni is Howie Roseman. I don't know, or is Laurie becoming more like Jerry Jones?
Moves like this seem like they're more owner influenced than GM influenced. I
Right.
mean, I think GMs, they try to take emotion out of it. They're more try to be more analytical, try to be more thinking about building a team over a 1, 3, 5 year period. And every GM will tell you that constantly getting onto that, new coach every 2 years, every 3 years is bad. And again, unless he's just a major dick who just kind of, his ego got overly inflated from the success from last year, and I tend to think that this, I have no inside sources, but to me, this kind of screams of owner getting embarrassed, owner don't like it, owner making his move.
Yeah, that's going to be something really interesting to watch in the coming weeks. Hopefully, as our fires on 1925 Giants Way or whatever are being put out, we can watch those fires off in the
the
distance.
The only other thing I really want to talk about this game is a question for you, Grump, and I didn't ask you this before. You know, I have a lot of friends that are Buck fans, being from Tampa Bay and everything, and I was having a pretty good discussion in the fourth quarter about Baker Mayfield. And he signed a 1 year deal going into this season, and he's been all right. I mean, not great, not horrible, but you know they win next week and they beat the Lions and they get to the NFC Championship game. You got to have to bring him back, and the question is, what do you pay for a guy like Baker Mayfield? I mean, what do you do if you're the GM of the Bucks? I mean, what is this a guy that you really want to kind of invest in for the next few years? And he's not going to come cheap. I mean, if is he a guy that would kind of command a contract, kind of like what Daniel Jones got, or less, more? And is he a guy who's worth it?
I mean, you're asking me some questions I don't think I'll ever have the answers to, like what he's going to command. I don't know. But I can tell you that he's not going to come cheap. If there's one thing that I think that the entire NFL learned this year, it's the value of a quarterback. I think that goes without saying. And he's proved his worth in that, over the course of his career, he's proved that he can learn systems quickly. He can function in them. He's a gamer. Certainly someone who puts himself on the line, and more than anything, he's tough and dependable. You know what I mean? He's certainly pretty durable. And I don't know if he's durable, but he's dependable in that he's going to try to play through injury. He's got a win it mentality. He wants to push the ball downfield. I think that makes it easy to scheme quick read offenses for him and things like that. Big strikes, which kind of was this game. Like, it's not like. I think at a certain point the Bucs took over this game, but for most of the year, I think the Bucs were kind of just a big strike offense. And like early on, Mike Evans was playing out of his mind. Mike Evans was on steroids or something this year. I mean, that's I'm like making a joke here. It's not a real accusation, but he was playing like he was 5 years younger for the first couple games. Pretty much the only reason the Bucs are even here.
He was playing like a guy that bet on himself and play out his contract and see what happens in this offseason is what he was playing like.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield is someone that is applicable to a lot of different quarterback situations, so he has a strong marketability. And I think the whole league knows that, and I think that they all saw just how bad things can get. And I think we're also approaching an understanding that it's silly to expect players to play 17 games. I mean, we're getting to the point where you have to expect that your quarterback might have to not play. Even if he's not so banged up that he can't play, that it's in the best interest of your team to not force him to play. I think that we might be transitioning towards that period of the NFL, and I don't know what he's going to. He'll command something. He'll have his pick of the litter, I think, on the market. I don't know how much I'm Tampa Bay, how much I'm investing, but they're certainly not going to be picking anywhere near getting a quarterback, and he's probably going to be the best one on the market this year.
Yeah, I agree. The Bucs, they certainly overachieved this year. I mean, I made two when I was in Vegas Labor Day, and I made a couple of futures bets, and the one that I did pick wrong was I had the Bucs winning under 5.5 wins this year. I thought they'd be terrible. I just didn't like that roster. I didn't like that offensive line. They had no running game, and I was just not a Baker Mayfield guy. I honestly thought that Kyle Trask was going to win the job coming out of training camp, and obviously I was wrong with that, and they overachieved. They're not a pretty team to watch, but it doesn't matter. The point is, we're going to divisional round series, and they're playing, and it would not shock me the way their defense is playing if they could, squeak out a win against Detroit either.
Let's flip over to the Bills and Steelers. Bills win this game 31-17. Now, you kind of missed the beginning of this game, so let me give you what I think I saw here. The Bills started this game, it looked like New Orleans after Katrina. Where it just felt like the atmosphere, like it was so goddamn loud. There was snow being thrown in the air. The Bills were absolutely crushing them to come out the gates. I mean, Mason Rudolph looked totally lost to start this game. There was a point at which it really could have been 21-0 going into the half, and it just felt like nobody was going to come into that stadium and beat them today. And I don't want to say that's wrong, but the Bills started going absolutely buck wild gambling stuff. And Tony Romo called it out on the broadcast like, that was a really gutsy call. Like right now, I'd be running the ball, running the clock down a little bit, pushing things forward. There's no reason to be taking that shot on second down. And very quickly, a blocked field goal came, and the Steelers struck back, and this game felt like it was in this weird nebulous phase for an entire half of football where it felt like the game was already over and Buffalo won and the rest of the game was a formality. But there was a very real chance. Pittsburgh was only 2 scores away, like pretty much at all times throughout the second half. And there was a point in which I even texted you. It was like, why is Jim Nantz acting like it's absolutely laughable that the Steelers could tie this up right now? I mean, I don't think it's likely, but there's 2 minutes and it's only 2 scores. I mean, it's one broken tackle for a touchdown and then an onside kick, and then we have a serious nail-biter moment for another minute.
There was a lot of that this weekend where the score wasn't really indicative of, the likelihood of the team that was losing coming back. I know as we did our, the little prep that we do for this show, we were kind of talking, and I was just like, a lot of these games, it never felt like the outcomes were in doubt, and you kind of were like exasperated, like what are you talking about? And this was one of those games. Like, I know it was only a 2-score game, but I just never really felt ever that Pittsburgh was going to actually make up the ground.
It doesn't matter what you felt, though, because it really was that. Like, they had the ball on the plus side of the field.
Right.
This one, my point is that Jim Nantz was quite literally laughing at the idea as if a broken tackle can't just happen. You know what I mean?
Which is interesting to me because, I am always a little bit of a conspiracy theorist with broadcasts where they like to push narratives. And, if this would have been ESPN, it would, in their best interest to have the Steeler fans still interested in stuff. You'd not have had like that laughable thing about it. I think so. I guess a good job by him by kind of being like that, but I never got the sense that we were seriously going to come back to this, and maybe that's just me.
No, I didn't either, but it's not the point. It's that it was for. This is the only game of the blowout games where it actually was possible. This was a 2-score game. I mean, the Cowboys game we're going to talk about. No, I'm sorry. The Rams-Lions game was another one, but we'll get there. But, for the big ones, Texans-Brown, that game was over before halftime. Chiefs-Dolphins, I didn't really see that one. Didn't look like the Dolphins ever got any rhythm. We'll get to that. Packers-Cowboys. Cowboys were never in that. That score made up, and they're still more than 2 scores away. They're 2 scores with two-point conversions away from tying it.
That's a pet peeve of mine. And I said it during this game too. If you're down 16, I get it. It's technically a 2-score game, but
barely.
That's a 4-score game.
Yeah,
you got to score basically 4 touchdowns. So stop.
This game, I would say, I never felt like the Bills were going to lose this game, but it didn't feel like the Steelers were going to win it. It did feel like if at any point though, like Buffalo could lose it. The way that this game started versus how Pittsburgh hung around in this game was just Buffalo's, just cocky mistakes. It felt like, but no, it didn't really feel like Pittsburgh was going to win this game.
I did have that feeling of Josh Allen's going to have this stupid turnover at any point in this game.
Yes.
And I said it to my friend as we were watching it. It's just like, it's coming, right? The silly, the silly throw or the trying to get extra yardage and it's going to cause a fumble. This is coming. So, the only way that I thought Pittsburgh would really have a chance would be if they, self-impose something.
Yes, if Buffalo lost. And not for nothing, but Buffalo continues to rack up injuries throughout the playoffs here. So, that's another factor in there.
Yes.
Lions-Rams, this was the best game of the weekend, I think. This was so much fun. Hot start for the Lions, and then they were absolutely useless in the second half. They scored nothing but a 54-plus yard field goal in the second half. And the Rams just struggled to punch it in. They were right there every step of the way, and they couldn't score touchdowns. This was just a really, really good, entertaining game to watch.
Yeah, man. Having it in Detroit, where it made it more fun too. It was just like you could tell on the TV the energy in that stadium and the excitement and all that. And they're two pretty close teams. You have quarterbacks who I think are exciting to watch, and you have the Rams are always been exciting for the last few years the way they do things, and this is what I expected. This is what you hope for in playoff games, and Detroit won. Good, good on them.
Yeah, this was just such a cool game. Of all the, feel bad for bad luck franchises, I think Detroit is the easiest one to root for. Personally, I've kind of have it in my heart right now to root for Detroit through the rest of these playoffs right now.
Yeah, I agree. Now that all the major rivals are gone, and you're right. Detroit never wallows in their misery. They just kind of like, okay, well, we're gonna give it our shot next year. I think some teams that have like the loser mentality, like the Clevelands of the world and the Jets, and it's almost like they become cartoon characters where like they wear it as a badge of honor. And I don't ever feel like Lion fan feels like that way. I feel like they're just like,
Waiting for their shot.
we'll get there at some point. At some point, a quarterback's going to hit. At some point, we're going to have a good coach. At some point,
Yeah.
and
I
think
that guy playing his birthday for the lottery numbers every single week. Packers Cowboys. This was probably the most enjoyable game of the week. This game was not close even a little bit, and yet I watched every minute as if it was Scorsese. It might have actually been Scorsese. Go ahead, tell me about it.
About as long as a Scorsese movie, that's for sure. Answer something, Grump. More enjoyable for you, the Dallas loss or the Philly loss?
I'm gonna say the Dallas lost because I really didn't see it coming. The Eagles one, like, they've been faltering for so long. The only thing was that, like, man, if it weren't the Bucks, like, in my head it was like the Eagles are so terrible. If they win this weekend, it's just because they played the worst team in the playoffs. They're not going far. But Dallas, I keep looking at that defense, and quite frankly, I don't know what happened to the defense in this game. Jordan Love absolutely carved them up. I really thought that Dallas could make some noise this year. Now, wow, that was bad.
Watching Green Bay on Thanksgiving and the way they carved up, the same Lions team we were just, glowing about, and then seeing in person what we did to them on that Monday night game, it's like, what team is this? So the Dallas thing, it's kind of like, it was so cliche to say, well, they'll choke in the first round and, Dak will choke, and it actually happening. And then obviously nobody could have expected what they did on defense. And that defense looked as bad as Philly did. And we're all kind of crowning, Dan Quinn. We're making the jokes, well, when they fire McCarthy, would Dan Quinn possibly take over, or what job is he going to have as a head coach? And I don't think one game makes that much of a difference for his future. But just unexpected but shocking is how I put the Dallas game. But for more enjoyable, I definitely think that Eagle one is, because just seeing those shots of the owner just sitting there with that puss on his face, and and just those douchebag fans, that to me was more enjoyable.
It's close.
Sure.
But I think after the Dallas collapse, I kind of almost felt like the Philly one was inevitable. It just felt like all of a sudden, I don't know. When I sat down to eat, it was like I'm ready to watch Philly lose, like with confidence. I can't really describe it to you. There's no reason to.
I will say one thing. I made one bet this weekend, and I made that bet last Sunday evening. When I saw that Philly was still a 3-point favorite after what I just saw at that Giant game, with seeing Jalen Hurts' finger at a 90-degree angle, knowing A.J. Brown was probably out, knowing all the other injuries, knowing how they've been like a turd in the toilet bowl for the last month, and they saw that they were still favored, I was like, man, I'm taking Bucks money line on this right now, because not only are they going to get points, they're going to win this thing outright, and I was rewarded by that. So that made me happy.
Yeah, so that one was a little bit more predictable. The only thing I can come away with the Dallas game, honestly, is that they just looked unprepared to play.
Mm-hmm.
This one looked like they came into this game on the ceremonial floats. They were ready to ride out of the stadium after a victory. That's the best explanation I can get. It's not a very scientific one. It's not a football one, but I don't have an explanation for what I saw out there. Micah Parsons was useless. I mean, And I don't think very highly of Jordan Love. I think he's fine. I think he's a quarterback that could punish you if you let him, clearly. Yeah, it just looked like they let him.
And Micah Parsons was getting the benefit of finally getting holding calls against him, too. So, like, he was actually getting some, more advantages. And you're right, he was useless. I don't understand how in this day and age when you're, especially a team like the Cowboys, when the pressure of the world is on you and the expectations and the 30 years that you can come off and look so unprepared and so flat. It's very easy to say that's Mike McCarthy's fault, but that also, when you're that unmotivated looking and unprepared looking, you also look into that locker room too and be like,
well, I was going to say, like, Dak Prescott's been here for these failures. These other guys have been here for these failures. Like, it's not... I know the coaches cycle out, and that you and I have been here as fans to see it go on and on. But we're going on several years. Dak Prescott has been the quarterback of this team. He has been, I don't want to say the reason, but he's certainly experienced. Probably at least blaming himself for some of this stuff. Like, you'd think that he would be getting the offense prepared, if not the coach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, does this, in your opinion, would it make any difference for you as far as, any thoughts of bringing him back and re-signing? Because last night, obviously the McCarthy stuff was like, well, he's going to be fired. And there's a lot of, well, I bring in Dak back now after this. And, I think that's a little over the top. I mean, do you bring in quarterbacks just because even though they may fail in the playoffs, you have to get to the playoffs? I'm a big, you got to get there first person. And there is a lack of really good quarterbacks in this league. But do you think that failures in the playoffs like this are a real barometer of gauging if you're going to reinvest in a guy, or you think it's one game and it just happens to be he plays bad in these games?
History says that it doesn't matter to Jerry Jones. So, I don't know where anyone can come away with saying, like, well, there's no way that Dak is back. Like, why not? Tony Romo was there for forever. He never won. He won less playoff games than Dak, didn't he? Didn't Dak win at least one?
Yeah, he won one 3 years ago?
Yeah.
2 years ago? Yeah.
I don't think Tony Romo won any.
No, and Tony Romo, remember, he had the thing with the field goal where he botched the hold. I mean, it was even worse than just than that.
I mean, come on, let's be serious. What? They're in no position to get anything, and Jerry Jones may be flippant, he may be, whatever, but he's pretty protective of that quarterback spot. I think he knows how important being quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys is to the image of the Dallas Cowboys. Sure. And if he's going to give it to just anybody, then it doesn't mean as much as he wants it to mean. So, no, I don't think that, you know what I mean? Maybe they move on from him, but they'll be very serious and cautious about how they do it.
Well, the replacement cost in this league, to bring in a quarterback, and they're not going to be drafting. They're not going to be in the position to draft anybody, and the cost to bring in someone really good is very expensive in this league too. And also we did a little exercise too. We were talking about it's not just the quarterbacks that Jerry Jones kind of protects, coaches as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we were thinking, oh, he recycles through these guys after 2 years and stuff. We did an exercise looking back really from the post Jimmy Johnson era, and almost every coach lasted 4 years before he finally smoked him, which is that's not a quick trigger. I mean, shit, the Giants are worse than that lately. So, but this is McCarthy's fourth year, and they. To
be fair though, when we were going back in time, we went way back to the 90s and we were saying 4 years, which was a quick trigger back then. But he's been consistent with it, which kind of makes it feel balanced out over time.
Yeah.
That's another one that's going to be really interesting to watch. It looks like I don't even know if there are going to be coaching moves there. I mean, there probably will be, but I don't know. Other than Jerry Jones saying that he said something that was like not even in English after the game. The most surprises or something.
Johnny Walker's, and you're not going to really speak very coherent. My crystal ball says that McCarthy is out and Sirianni's back. That's my personal prediction.
I agree.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the Chiefs-Dolphins game. I cold boycotted. In that, I just wasn't going to put in any extra effort. I didn't organize a boycott or bitch about it, but sorry, I'm not putting in any extra effort in to watch your game. So tell me all about it. It looked boring.
It looked boring. It was boring. It's one of those, Miami to a lesser degree is the Eagles, how they've kind of collapsed this year. I mean, more injuries also, but it sounds cool to say, oh, it's -4 degrees, it's the tundra and all that, but unfortunately, it just doesn't make for good football. And this was a game that you just watch and you see these guys look like they're all on roller skates. And we're in the playoffs. You want to see the best teams play. You want good football. You want, if you don't care who wins or loses, you just want to see teams at their best. You don't want to see guys get hurt and a backup has to play. And this is what this felt like. It just felt like it was so cold and just looked so awful that these teams weren't playing at their best. And Miami, again, if the season ended in mid-October, we might be having a Miami Eagles Super Bowl, but we play 17 games and that's kind of it.
Yeah, I kind of skimmed through the highlights there. It just looked like the Dolphins never really got any rhythm. Like there'd be some chunk plays, and then it was just outside of field goal range, or they would screw something up and get sacked, and they'd be out of field goal range, and so they were just perpetually stuck at this, 7-point thing. And at the same time, it's not like the Chiefs were doing anything great. The coolest thing is that Pacheco looked like he was running like an animal. That was probably the coolest thing.
What is that Olympic sport? The hammer throw? Where you're throwing that big thing, kind of like. That's what it looked like when Tua was kind of throwing, like he was throwing a hammer. Just the weather and maybe the conditions or something, but it just didn't look natural. It looked like it was a struggle and a grind.
Yeah. And then the first game of the Wildcard Weekend, Texans-Browns. This one was an absolute beatdown. 45-14. This game was over before halftime. And C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins were absolutely excellent in this game. The defense completely overmatched Joe Flacco. And then this game, the second half of the game really was a formality. I mean,
yeah.
I don't think Cleveland even moved into plus territory, I think, by like the fourth quarter.
Today I went to the Knicks game with a friend of mine, and we went to the bar after watching the second half of the Buffalo game, and he is a Carolina Panther fan. And seeing C.J. Stroud and seeing the fact they don't have a draft pick and all this stuff makes him very, very angry.
I can imagine.
Yeah. We didn't talk much about the Panthers.
I mean, look, you can get mad about that, but there's also no head coach there. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in that organization. So
Sure. And the one thing I did say to him is you don't give up on a quarterback after year one.
So you thought that this was not an exciting weekend because these games were not at any point close, and it was always pretty easy to tell. But you don't think that it's exciting that C.J. Stroud absolutely overwhelmed Cleveland? You don't think that was amazing? I mean, we went through this predictions. It was kind of hard to tell who was going to win that game.
I think Packers. I think it's impressive. I don't think it's exciting necessarily.
Man, you're no fun.
It's the AFC.
The fact that there is a blowout when you don't expect a blowout should be like there's no like wow factor for you. You're like, wow, this is incredible, and you can keep watching like, geez, look at it. But you don't get any entertainment out of that. Saying it's impressive implies no entertainment. Like, yeah, that's impressive. It means nothing.
I mean, it was impressive when it happened, but the most exciting thing about sports is like what's going to happen at the end. Like how is this going to turn out? I don't know how this is going to end up.
No,
that to me is the most exciting thing.
Oh man, I think that you have this is my thought here is that you have a bias against not giving a shit about the AFC. Because was the Packers-Cowboys game exciting for you?
It was exciting that Dallas was getting their asses kicked, but it was not an exciting game. I mean, the game was over. It was over pretty early. That doesn't make it an exciting game. It makes it.
No, it doesn't. But it's still entertaining. It's still exciting to watch because you don't know.
It's entertaining for me to watch my rivals get their asses kicked. I am a masochist. I hate those teams, and to me, I can sit there with a bottle of brandy and my cigar and my smoking jacket. Like, this is fantastic, but exciting.
I also think that storylines make things fun. The fact that the Packers were not supposed to go in there and do that makes it because
Well, I don't
sure it's out of reach, but I do want to continue to see shots of the sideline. I want to see Jerry Jones up in the thing. It makes it fun.
It makes it. I mean, there's different emotion. I mean, exciting is not the emotion I use for that. I think
it's still entertaining.
Engaged. I didn't turn one of these games
exactly
off.
My point. See, to me, like, not entertaining. Like, I almost turned off the Texans-Browns game. Like, it got to a point where I was like, wow, they're getting ready. They put Davis Mills in there at one point, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that I left the room. Like, that game, fine. That one really, truly got out of hand. But the rest of them, I didn't turn any of them off. I mean, they're great.
For me, my personality as I'm getting older is kind of like, I can just watch a game and not have to have a rooting interest necessarily. And I can just kind of, not that I'm a reporter, like, no cheering in the press box type of person, but like, that's why, like, sports gambling for me never really stuck as like, I need some juice in this game to get me interested. Like, these games are interested to me because, we're now into the serious part of the season where I've been, obviously as a Giant fan and doing this show, I have a very vested interest in the Giants and what happens, but I'm also very vested in the league. And now we're coming to the conclusion now, and I want to see how this is all finally playing out. So that is all my kind of my interest. Like, sports are great when you have an interest in something and it means something. The second something doesn't mean anything, and this is something for me as I'm getting older, I don't care nearly as much anymore. And for me, the overarching story of we're now in sudden death. We're now getting to who's going to be the champion. That's enough for me to be engaged. Whether it's, ultimately exciting or not, the game itself still has to be exciting for me to be like, that's exciting. But were any of these games really going to be memorable for me in 2, 4, 5 years from now, other than, when Dallas got their asses kicked or the Eagles got their asses kicked? No.
I will remember the Bills game for the snow and for the way that they played to start the game, and I'll remember that Lions-Rams game.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions-Rams game was like, that's a good game. It's not going to be an all-time remembrance for me. I'm not going to, this is the 9th anniversary of that game, or I don't refer to it as the X game. Like certain playoff games are, the fumble or the drive or the, the helmet catch or the whatever. I mean, these are just it was a solid game. It was a fun game. I don't know how it's going to go down in my memory banks as being particularly memorable, other than that game. That's fine. I mean,
if your only memory of games are moments that have nicknames, then I guess this game would fall short of that.
Yeah, but it's still it did its job from a entertaining standpoint for sure. That was 3 hours of, I'm not sure who's going to win this thing, and.
All right, you curmudgeon. Since you want to fast forward to the end of the story, let's go through it then. Ravens are hosting the Texans. How do you feel?
That Ravens team is tough, man. I mean, CJ Stroud's a great story. Good for them, but Ravens are tough. I think Ravens win, and I think they win kind of convincing. I think CJ Stroud. I think the midnight and whatever Cinderella, analogy you want to use happens in this game, I think.
Are the Ravens going all the way for you, or no? We're going to give our AFC and NFC picks here.
Yeah, I think they're going to the Super Bowl.
Okay. I think the Ravens win this game, but I do think that I have this weird feeling that, like, coming out of halftime, suddenly this is a game again, or something like that. I don't think that they. I think that the Ravens pull away right early, but it gets close again. And I think also that the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl. I think that they're the healthiest AFC team that looks the most impressive. They are the complete package. It would take. I mean, like honestly, this does have trap game written all over it. This could be the riding high confidence collapse. I haven't seen anything from Baltimore this year that suggests that.
I also think that John Harbaugh, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for being a really good coach. I mean, I think
I agree.
people know he's a good coach, but I think if you say who are the top 3 coaches in the NFL, I don't know how many people have him on there, and he definitely should get some consideration for it.
Yeah. Always well prepared, and for what it's worth, everyone talks about how he's a special teams coordinator. He always brings in good coordinators to run his team. Good coordinators always come out of there. So,
yeah.
Chiefs are hosting the Bills.
I'm going to call an upset here. I think Buffalo's going to win.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I think Buffalo is riding high, and just I don't know how much longer that they can keep slugging forward, all battered and beaten the way they are. But I don't think Kansas City looks fantastic this year at all.
I don't think so either.
You don't think playing at home means anything for this game?
I think weather is a bigger deal than the home crowd advantage and everything. And Kansas City played in worse conditions than Buffalo did probably. So I think that kind of is a big offset. And I think a team like Kansas City, they have played in a lot of big games in the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't think it's as big of a deal. I think if it's like a team like Houston going in, I think it's a much, much bigger deal than them.
49ers and Packers. I don't think this game's even close. I think San Francisco comes out and doesn't stop.
I think they're going to roll right to the Super Bowl also.
Yeah, I agree. Is there anything that you think might get in their way that might trip them up? I mean, obviously the normal stuff like if Brock Purdy gets hurt, but I mean, there's nothing that even comes to mind for me.
I think if any team they play can get a consistent pass rush and put Brock Purdy on his heels a little bit, that's a possibility, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Lions and Bucks. I think that the Baker Mayfield magic kind of ends now. I know you're gonna call an upset right now. I can see it on your face. I don't like Jared Goff. I think I even texted you during the game. He looks like the least athletic athlete sometimes, man. Watched him try to escape pressure where he had a head start. And he just looks like he's running in cement and quicksand at the same time and still managed to get tripped up. I couldn't believe it. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. I think the Detroit team just looks too complete for the Bucks right now. And I really am rooting for them to move forward. So I'm going to go Detroit.
I'm going Detroit also, and I think they're going to go comfortably. The bottom line is, in the playoffs, you have to score and score consistently. And I think the Bucks took advantage of a banged up Philly team that quit. And who knows what else is going on. If we rewind back to the beginning of this episode for all we talked about that. I just, one game to me doesn't let me ignore the previous 7 or 8 games, and that Bucks team has had trouble scoring and getting out of its own way quite a bit. I can't ignore what I saw in week 17 and 16. I am not a Baker Mayfield believer. I think he's an average quarterback who's healthy, and I think that goes a long way in this league. It'll be a different story. I think he also, the cliche is like Josh Allen. Oh, he's good for 1 or 2, dumb plays and bad turnovers a game. But I feel like Baker's kind of like that too. I think sometimes he just has 1 or 2 really stupid throws a quarter, and we saw it even tonight. And when you're playing, that place is going to be an absolute madhouse, in Detroit. And I think that's going to impact them. And I think I think Detroit wins double digits at least.
I really want to see Detroit make it to the Super Bowl. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm gonna pull for the poor people from up north there that can't seem to get anything. But in Giants news, we're gonna rifle through two little pieces of news really quickly because they're honestly, in my opinion, not too much to talk about right now. But it is big news. The Giants hired an offensive line coach, Carmen Bricello. He's the Raiders' offensive line coach. That is super important. We had Anthony on the show last, and we asked him, the point-blank question was, what is the most important thing for this offseason for you? And he said it's the offensive line coach. So I texted him immediately. I was like, well, your dream came true. We made that upgrade. How'd we do? You know what I mean? And honestly, it's just too hard to tell. You look at an offensive line coach, and if they don't have this proven track record, this is kind of what Bobby Skinner said too. Is that like if he's not a name, it's really hard to tell. If he doesn't have a proven track record of going from place to place and fixing things up, it's just there's too much to wade through with what's up to the offensive coordinator, what's up to the head coach, what's based on personnel. The offensive line coach develops talent. And so really you have to be at a place for a long enough time to say, I watched this guy who was a mid-round pick. All these guys are mid-round picks. They all consistently got better, which is something that I can certainly do with him. He's been in Vegas for 3 years. Again, it's really difficult to tell a lot of the nuances, but you can kind of see some development there. But I simply haven't had the time to go through all that. So right now it's just to say none of the guys on that line are big-time names that came with big-time pedigree, and yet that line has been pretty okay the whole time this whole season. So that certainly speaks to him, right?
Michelangelo worked best with granite and not limestone. And I think with a coach, a lot of it is what are you working with and can you maximize what you're getting. I don't think offensive line coaches can turn water into wine and take bad talent and all of a sudden make them a really good offensive line. But I think good offensive line coaches take talent and make them a cohesive unit. And now we're just gonna have to see. I think the building blocks are there on this roster still. And we know we have an all-pro at left tackle. We have 2 prospects at center at right tackle for, whatever steps they took backwards this year and last year. They come to the table with talent. We're talking about a right tackle that was the best lineman in the SEC. And we're talking about a center that was pretty much universally the best center in that draft. And we're only a year or 2 out from when they were in college. And I think, we complained about coaching. We complained about, the lack of development with these guys. We complained about how these offensive line couldn't do things like adjust to simple things like stunts. And, this is the opportunity to get better. So, I think we'll see results immediately if he's a really good coach and it works out well. That you will see technique things instantly cleaned up and stuff. Whether that makes him a much better offensive line is to be determined. But I think we'll be able to see right away. Hey, it looks like JMS's footwork is better, or is Evan Neal's leverage better than it was before? Is he moving better? And that I think we'll be able to see pretty quickly after, an off season and a training camp. So that's what I'm hoping to see.
And look, I think a lot of this comes down to everybody overthinking and just like the world we live in the the nonstop 24-hour a day, 365-day conversation that is Twitter. I mean, that really is what Twitter is. It's just a conversation that never stops. We overthink some things, and I think that the main thing to take away is that the Giants identified that they are not developing O-line talent. They fired the coach, and they went out and they got a guy that develops O-line talent. That already, whether he's good at it, mediocre at it, I don't think he's going to be bad at it. That was like a main focus in this hire. So the fact that even if he's just mediocre at it, the amount of investment that they put into this offensive line with, 3 high picks, and not only just 3 high picks, but just multiple, free agent
We spent
and
money on
yeah,
other guys too.
we
Yeah.
spent money on other guys. We made trades for other guys, and we spent mid-round picks on other guys, which is not nothing. There is a significant focus here, and it seems like the missing piece over the years was an O-line coach to teach them. So I think it can only go up from where we had it. I think that's kind of my baseline. Is I'm happy enough with that just by the fact that they understood what the problem was and they addressed it. I don't think it's going to get worse.
And I think after 2 years is a good time to make these assessments and these changes. I think
Right.
sometimes, after 1 year, well, this isn't working out, we're moving on. You are, as a new head coach and a coaching staff, you are dealt a hand of talent. Probably not very good talent, because otherwise you wouldn't be the head coach, most likely. The other coach would still be there. But still, you have to assess after a year what your talent is, and also start cycling in guys who fit what you're trying to do. You may have several round pegs to get in the square holes. So I think after 2 years, your roster is in a much better place for what you're trying to do. And then you can kind of say, well, may not be the talent we have on the field. It might be, what we have, coaching, scheme, development, all those things. So I think, you know, it's okay after 2 years to start making these changes. I mean, these are things that we've been crying for, and the two biggest things that we thought have been addressed between that and special teams. So now it's up to the new coaches, and continuing improving the talent to gel and be better.
Last thing, the Giants and Wink Martindale mutually decided to part ways officially. We had reported on a resignation because that's what we were told, and then it never actually happened, and then he went to Sarasota. But basically, they kind of shook hands and said, you can go work wherever you want, but we're not paying you $3 million next year. And to me, this is frustrating because I don't really care from like a pettiness standpoint of who's right, who's wrong, who's the bigger baby. But the Giants had the morally superior position in that they had, I think they had the will of the people behind them after the article came out. I think, calculated move, but nevertheless was the scenario. And you kind of had this guy backed into a corner. And you can do anything you want here. You can go as far as to say, if you're not going to report to work, then we will just hire an assistant defensive coordinator and he'll run the defense and you can sit at home. I don't care. You know what I mean? That only hurts him and his ability to get a job in the future. They had all of the leverage here, and what they ended up doing is they just walked away and let him have basically what he wanted, which was freedom. He wanted to get fired from this job so that he could work wherever he wanted. I think that the $3 million check was a bonus in his mind. I think that he thought, 10 weeks ago or whenever this started, if he could get fired, then yeah, he's going to get that check. But after I think after 3 weeks, you see the long game is being played by the Giants. You know that check is a pipe dream. Then really all he wanted was to be free. And you let this guy act like an asshole and essentially somewhat sabotage things. I mean, kind of did everything he could to divide the locker room in a sense, short of, instructing his players one way or another. And then you just let him walk away. And here we might be dealing with the fact that he is the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles next year. Perhaps he's the head coach of Dallas next year. We don't know any of this stuff. And we just let him walk away because I don't know why.
I just want to be done with it. And I think that's just the Giants style of we just want to be done with it. We paid potentially with him being a coach on a rival or a competitor. That's our cost for saying enough. We don't want to deal with this anymore. We want to move forward. We don't want to be constantly asked. It's over and we're done with it. couple of things that about this. It's like, yeah, we got, other than saving the money, he's free to go everywhere. But I've really been thinking about what is his marketability at this point. This is job number 2 where it's ended this way. In theory, the Wink defense is really good. It's really aggressive and it's really modern. But, also the Giants defense was okay this year. Nothing. And the numbers probably paint a worse story than what the perception of our defense was this year. So, he, as much as we liked him, we liked the defense and what he was trying to do, he's not Buddy Ryan, and he's also a guy who doesn't have a long shelf life with other places. So if he goes to Philly next year, how long is he really going to be at Philly? I mean, is he going to be there? Is he going to wear out his welcome after 2 years? Is he going to stay there for 3? If he becomes a head coach, he's a head coach. I mean, he probably would become a head coach even if none of this nonsense happened anyway. I don't think that if you're in the market for Wink Martindale, the head coach, I don't think any of this is really bothering you. I think it would have happened anyway. So
my only thing is that we've never seen Wink Martindale as head coach. We don't know. So we can say how long is he going to last there, but that also could be the famous last words of the Boston Red Sox trading away Babe Ruth. Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't know. Maybe Philadelphia hires him as head coach, and for the next 25 years, he reigns supreme in the NFC East, and there's a statue of him outside next to Rocky.
Wait a minute. My point about, let him go to, like, how long is he going to be? That was if he went to become a defensive coordinator, not as a head coach. They're two different things. If he becomes a head coach, you're right. We don't know. And, he might become a really good head coach, but he probably would have become a head coach anyway if none of the drama and none of the nonsense happened. I mean, if let's say things were fine, and I'm sure he would have gotten an interview. There's 8 openings for head coaches this year. I am pretty positive he would have got at least one interview somewhere, and maybe would have taken it. My point was, if he goes to become the Philly defensive coordinator or the Dallas defensive coordinator or wherever,
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Let's be honest. He called New York a destination. He had a relationship with John Mara. He interviewed here to be a head coach. Everywhere he's ever interviewed to be a head coach, he has been denied. He's even been quoted as saying that, you get yourself a young offensive-minded guy and he becomes a head coach. That seems to be the way things are around here. Don't you think that at this point he realizes his only shot at being a head coach is to have a good relationship somewhere and be a good defensive coordinator and then earn the job when the head coach leaves? I'm not conspiracy theorying that he was forcing a Dable or me thing or anything like that, but I do think that he realizes that that's his best shot to become a head coach, is for things to fall apart around him, let him become an interim head coach, and then earn that job at that place.
Well, the one thing is, I don't care what he says. What guy is it going to say this is a destination or this is my dream job?
My point is, I was trying to stack multiple things there, but I agree. I don't listen to what people say, really.
Yeah, I don't care what people say. That's all in the moment, and you're trying to build a rapport, and so I don't care about that. Possible, but just because he might think that might be the best way doesn't mean he can't help himself by acting contrary to what he believes. I mean, people go into marriages all the time saying, I'm going to be faithful. This is the woman for the rest of my life. And then have marriages and then divorce, or they cheat or something. So what the brain thinks and what the heart does are two different things. And maybe he's just, he decided that well, I'll wait till things happen around me, and he just kind of got impatient, and I'm like, well, I'm going to speed that timeline up myself by being subversive. We don't know. I don't know what his psyche is or something, and you might be very right about that. But, I don't know. Do you think this episode has hurt him around the league by becoming another defensive coordinator, or do you think it's hurt him becoming a head coach, or do you think it doesn't matter?
I think it's too early to tell. I think that details are continuing to spill out to you and me, but I think that the story of what happened here, I think, is already known around league sources, right?
I 100% believe that.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Like, guys in the industry talk,
Hmm.
especially guys who are looking for jobs. We've heard rumors that, people were told, like, don't come here. So I think it remains to be seen. We got the Paul Schwartz article, we got the Pat Leonard article, and I think the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
But we're not going to get the story on a day. It's going to drip and drab out, and we're going to have to look at all the facts to really
Hmm.
say whether or not it hurt him or not. I think that there's a chance that there are places that are like, wow, that really was an impossible situation that you were in. I understand. It's possible.
Yep.
The headset thing in that article, I don't want to get into the whole thing about the article, but the headset thing in the article, that's a pretty bad look. Um,
Hmm.
so
Yeah. Well, again,
Well, what do you think? Do you think that he hurt himself, or do you help himself? What do you think?
I think I think you are what you are, and I think everybody knows who these guys are. I think that he got a job with the Giants pretty quickly after the Baltimore gig, knowing again we'll never know the story what happened over there either, but I think talent always trumps all this other stuff. If you are, you know, if you could throw a fastball 100 miles an hour, it doesn't matter if you committed crimes or are just a complete asshole. If you can do something that not many people can do, they'll overlook it and you will get the job. And I think for someone like him, who is, I believe, a very good defensive coordinator, um, I think a lot of that stuff will be because everybody thinks, and remember, we're talking about an ego league and ego positions. Head coach, that won't happen with me. I'm in charge. I'll show him. I will keep him in line. Everybody thinks they can do that. And the numbers that can are probably low. But at the end of the day, coaches, owners, GMs, they just want to win. And they think, get me the best guy to do this to increase my chances of winning and being successful. And I'll put up with the nonsense. I can deal with it. So I don't think it's going to make much of a difference for him. Um, I think him getting out and trying to get his story out there early, probably, you know, some people, he already has some people in his camp. They're like, this wasn't all your fault. It just takes one person to, one general manager, one head coach to be like, I don't really believe much of that story. And then he's got a job. So I think he'll be a defensive coordinator again. I don't think he's going to be a head coach. I think somebody will hire him. And I think in, 2+ years, he'll be looking for another job again.
Could you see him being a head coach at like Western Kentucky? He was the defensive coordinator there. I didn't pull that out of nowhere.
How old is he?
60. He is well liked by the player. I think he can relate to players. That's why I asked.
A 60-year-old who all of a sudden has to go on the recruiting trail and doing all that stuff. That's kind of a young man's game. So I would say no.
Okay. That's going to do it for this episode. We will be back next week. Unless there is breaking news, we will be back next Tuesday morning for a recap of the divisional round and more Giants news and off-season stuff. So we will have our off-season coverage begin sort of as we continue to cover the playoffs, and then we'll go into full swing after the Super Bowl, and I would say even the week before the Super Bowl.
And I'm looking forward to this offseason kind of review and preview because this is an interesting team right now where I don't think some people may have gloom and doom about this team, but I don't. And I think it's going to be really fascinating for us to go through our assessment of the different positions and position groups like we do and kind of identify what we need and everything. So I'm really looking forward to this offseason to really start digging deep. 'Cause I don't think it's the end of the world for this team. I really don't.
No, I actually think that it presents some interesting opportunities for them, so I'm looking forward to it as well. So be sure to come back here on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course YouTube for continuing coverage of the Giants throughout this offseason and heading into the 2024 season. And we will see you next time. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.